on definitions for the election law. So, yeah, here it is. So campaign organization per the code can start at any time. That's when you can start to think about slogans, start to think in your mind that you may want to run, and like I said, that can start anytime. So if you're thinking about running something now, this could be the campaign organization period for you. Campaign preparation is signaled by what is typically call night. That's when you can start garnering support. You can't share your platform per the code now, but you can start garnering support. You can start pulling lists of people who want to buy a t-shirt from you, things of that nature, buying things. That's when you technically submit initial materials during this period. You come to orientations, take the election law test. All of that is campaign preparation. Preliminary campaigning as it stands right now is preliminary campaigning as it stands right now, preliminary campaigning starts 3 hours before formal campaign kickoff. And typically, the only things that happen during preliminary campaigning are that people put posters up and they put their billboards wherever they want them. And then formal campaigning, obviously, is kickoff, chapter visits, all that kind of stuff. So that's a clarification. If anybody was wondering what the difference between those different periods are before y'all start voting tonight. And then also, I said this in cabinet, and this is a little bit more serious, but y'all, please take some time to check on your friends. There have been a ton of really terrible acts of senseless violence in the country. No matter where you stand, on what side of the aisle, or whatever issue, there are people hurting right now, and there are people whose real families and real lives have been affected by the events that have gone on in the past 96 hours. So please check on people, and please don't take this as a moment of silence. Please take this as a moment of action, because people keep being silent and bad things keep happening to people who don't deserve them to happen to them. Thanks.
Is there anyone else wishing to address the Senate body? Moving into roll call, please go ahead and click A on your iPad if you haven't done so yet, so you may be here. And moving into the approval of the minutes. Minutes were sent out to you electronically last week. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes stand. We'll move into reports, beginning with committee reports and at large. I guess so during this time, if you want to present your costume, stand up, all of y'all. So, at large.
Okay, none at large. We can stand up too. Sorry, kind of got. Hey, okay. So just one thing from us. Family Fridays this Friday at November 2nd, 3 p.m. We actually have a speaker, Lieutenant General Darcy Rogers, graduated 87. That's at the Alumni Center at 3 p.m. So y'all tell y'all's constituents about it. And, yeah, that's about it.
Agriculture.
Agriculture. I'm a caddy, not a serial killer, so the bag, it makes sense with the bag since stuff. But the ag school, we took 8 students and we went to Atlanta, and we got a tour of the Chick-fil-A headquarters and their test kitchen, and that was a really cool experience for all of us. I went and got a lot of free food, so we all fattened up. But we got to meet the CFO of Chick-fil-A and the lead engineer for their in charge of bagging and making things faster, more efficient. And it was really cool to hear about everything at Chick-fil-A. I mean, it's really cool that how much they formed each individual team member. So that's basically it.
Business.
That's all we got.
May I use this time to please move Election Law Chapter 702 up to a current order?
Are there any objections to moving item C in future orders to current order of business?
This is on behalf of Ada Rubin Huntley, and she wasn't able to be here tonight. But because it is an election law, she asked me to do this because it needs to take place 30 days before, in order for it to be active and for reactivating the real-time team on this, it has to have 30 days in the system to go into effect. I would love to discuss that further though, if anyone has an issue with that. I know y'all haven't had a chance to review it.
Is there any discussion or objection to moving this to a current order? Seeing none, we'll be discussing item C. Patsy?
Hello, Cassie. Obviously, I'm a SEC rep from the LSU game, Auburn game, so I forgot my flags at home. Anyways, but I met with my constituents over the week, last week, and we have a meeting with all the lower end of the constituents next Tuesday, and we had a great event. If anyone went out to Carve Pumpkins last Friday, it's a great event. They raised a lot of money, so it's really exciting too. But that's all.
Yes, ma'am.
This is just what we hope to be one day. Maybe if Sam doesn't kiss us.
Education?
We are fantasy football.
Yeah. Engineering?
Alright, so we are the Mighty Ducks in 20 years. And we have, I think Sarah has an announcement.
Well, do you want to talk about town hall? Well, basically, we had town hall last week with the dean, and he kind of informed a lot of people about in the youth student center that they're going to be having. We will just have a lot of questions on that, about parking, and so that sort of stuff.
Forestry and Wildlife Science?
Bostic Forestry. A little while ago, I and my other peers that are in leadership positions met with the dean and the associate dean of the college, and that went really well. They informed us of a new leadership academy that they're going to be starting that'll be in the evenings, and the application was sent to all of our students through email. Must be in a junior standing and you have 3 semesters or have 3 semesters left at Auburn. And then on November 14th, we will have our school fair at the School of Forestry and Wildlife Sciences in conference room 1101 from 10 to 2 p.m. That's all I got.
That's good.
Zinner, Private School. As you can all see, I am justice. Okay, so partially the costume, but also my school's council asked you all, I know we have a little over a week, but vote on November 6th. Please do it. Everyone on my school council wanted me to say this. So. Also, it's a little early, but I believe April 9th, so we're talking next semester here, late next semester, is going to be the Student Research Symposium. The Grad Student Council is one of the major groups putting that together. So that's open to graduate and undergraduate students. So if you're doing any undergraduate research, just put that date on your calendar, think about it. It's a great opportunity to share some of the work you've been doing. And finally, the Graduate Student Senate meets on Wednesday. If there's anything you want them to know about, anything at all, let me know. Just keep it serious, please.
Liberal arts?
Davis Liberal Arts. So I've recycled this costume so many times. I'm not proud of it anymore, but yeah, people still tell me it looks great. But as far as liberal arts goes, we had our career track to Birmingham last Tuesday, and I had the privilege of going that. We got to see some wonderful companies in Compass Health, as well as the Shelby County Chamber of Commerce and 58 Incorporated Economic Development programs there. So career initiatives are going great in the College of Liberal Arts. The Career Peer Council is currently looking for our speakers for next semester, as well as planning out the career trek to Atlanta next semester as well. So that's all.
No report, except for I did want to clarify, nurses have to do in-depth cardiac assessments, so I am the queen of hearts.
Pharmacy?
No report.
Moving into committees, we'll start the executive committee. Academic affairs?
But yeah, engineering. Just a few things from me. Senator Zinner scheduled or emailed the Associate Provost, Dr. Wynn, to schedule a meeting to talk about the academic honesty code, so we can touch on that a little bit more. Also, I yield the rest of my time to Senator Dobbs.
Alright. So something that we've been looking at recently on academic affairs
budget and finance. Anyone can do that? Code of laws.
Zinner, graduate school. So we got a lot more code bills coming through. As you can see, it's just about everything today, next week as usual. As Senator Vagio said, we are meeting with Associate Provost and a few other people to discuss the Academic Honesty Code. Yeah, one of the really cool things is Honesty Code is entirely in the Code of Laws, so that is, again, something that the Student Senate does have influence over. And I want to make sure everything in there looks good, is along with everything else. I just don't want to do anything crazy, throw the administration for a loop. So we want to keep them in the loop as much as possible. Now with that, I guess I can move on to code education, presented by yours truly. And I promise it was not entirely planned by my costume. We will be talking about hearings and student discipline. It's something that we need to talk about. But it's cool to do it in a justice costume. So, to begin, talking about hearings and student discipline today. You go on to the next one. Just basic goals. Ensure that you're all educated on issues related to student discipline and hearings. There's a number of different boards and committees that have a very serious impact on your life in both positive and negative ways. I think that we should all know about them, know our rights, and know how those procedures work. Secondly, it's important to discuss these disciplinary bodies and their distinct roles, a few of them. And finally, transparency for the student body. I don't think enough people have read all the policies. That's a theme for me, as you know, if you know me. Read all the policies if you can. But have read all the policies, what is the student conduct? What is academic honesty, things like that. So without further ado, I'd like to begin with elections. So elections hearings, before I begin, I want to get one thing out of the way, because I know this gets confused sometimes. There are two different boards, Elections Board and Elections Council. I am talking today about the Elections Board. Elections Council is the group that plans elections. They do a lot of important stuff, but they're not the ones deciding on rulings which could impact an election in the same way. So that's what we're talking about today. Now, one of the things you'll notice if you start to look at elections hearings is that the process is quite rapid. Like, you submit a violation, and depending on where in the campaign cycle you are, it's anywhere from a few days to later that day that you can get the hearing. 2-minute opening statements for accuser and accused. Again, very brief. Other things do not give that 2-minute limit. Board can ask questions, followed by 2 minutes of closing statements. And the decision may be appealed to the judicial branch of that. So we're going to be talking about the judicial branch in just a moment. But one of the things very quick about this, decisions are supposed to be posted by 8 a.m. the next day. That's pretty quick. So that's one of the major themes in elections board. Obviously, you can try to present witnesses and evidence, but one of the reasons this has to be so quick is because, well, you just got 1 week of formal campaigning, and campaign period entirely is just a few months, so you've got to get that stuff rolling, get that through. We can move on to the next one. You're referencing Annual Code of Law 711. As usual, I always put the Code of Law section where it is, so you can look at that and check me. The next one is judicial hearings. Now, the judicial branch has jurisdiction of the code and constitution, and they also have appellate jurisdiction over election violations, as I mentioned earlier. And also, this one's really interesting, I think, SAP budget decisions. So if an SAP really takes issue with the budget, they can appeal to the judicial branch and say that, oh, this was unfair, and the judicial branch will have to give a ruling on that. They also are responsible for interpreting any section of the code or constitution within 1 week. So if there's something that's really vague, you can put a formal request to the judicial branch, and they will have a hearing there. Hearings generally follow Robert's Rules of Order, and their cases are all, with one notable exception, decided by a majority vote. And let's go on to the next slide, which is that major exception, impeachment. So impeachment, I brought this a little bit differently just because it's a little bit unique. It has to come through us, the Student Senate. It may be brought against any elected or appointed SGA official. So anyone in this room, or almost anyone in this room, Student Senate presents the charges. There has to be, I believe, 3 sponsors and co-sponsors on the bill. So you can't just have one crazy senator trying to impeach everybody. You got to have at least 3 crazy senators trying to impeach everybody. It must then be approved by a 5/6 majority. So again, charges against the student. And another important thing is naming of the charging party. Now, typically, they will name whoever's charging it, which is usually the first accuser, but there are exceptions to this, as laid out. You can read more about in the student code of conduct, but if you are accused of something, or if you do accuse someone of something, know that your name most likely will be made available within that hearing. Those hearings are somewhat confidential, but not necessarily. If it's a very sensitive personal matter, sometimes at the discretion of, I believe, someone in the Vice President of Student Affairs office, it can be kept confidential. Charge and charging party, they both have an advisor throughout this process. So if there's somebody you want, if you're charging somebody and you want some emotional support, if you want, well, basically advice, but that advisor is not a lawyer and they are not allowed to speak for you in the hearings or anything like that. I can speak only to you. First thing, you can request a facilitated meeting. So this would be with one of the faculty members from the Student Discipline Committee. And so this is a little bit more informal, so you don't have to bring the full committee together. I imagine it's more for smaller offenses. Okay, you did this, what should be the sanctions? And if everyone can agree on something, you don't have to go to the full committee. However, if you do, then you have a hearing, which involves opening statements from both parties. Each party may present evidence and witnesses. The burden of proof is set to lie on the charging party, but it's just satisfied by preponderance of information, which means that, and this is they're very clear, this is not a legal proceeding, but this is pretty similar to the legal standard of preponderance of the evidence, which is sometimes referred to as just 50% of the factor. So if it's slightly more likely than not that somebody did something, then it's considered, yes, you have enough evidence to charge somebody under the current student discipline code. All of these hearings are recorded and they're maintained in the Office of Student Affairs. Again, this information is kept confidential just within the office, within the parties involved. It's not something that you're going to see playing on Eagle Eye next week, student conduct hearings. That's not going to happen. The committee, once they're all done with the hearings, they make a recommendation. Technically, the committee is not the one that imposes the sanction. They make a recommendation to, I believe, the Vice President for Student Affairs office, and someone from there will impose a sanction. The recommendations may be appealed to an appeals panel, which is essentially a second student conduct or student discipline committee, and they can take a look at it. Maybe the sanctions were too strong, maybe not strong enough, or maybe that you didn't do anything wrong whatsoever. So they can take a second look at that. And again, you can see all the records there, student code of conduct, as well as the code of laws, because we do reference at least a little bit about the committee in our code of laws. There are students on that committee, which is important to note. There are students on just about all of these committees that I'm talking about. Now, finally, I want to talk about the last one, which is academic honesty. I know we talked in basic terms about the academic honesty code. This today is really going to be referring to the specifics of the academic honesty procedure. So again, to begin with the official notice of charges, the code of laws, and you'll notice that this is only contained in the code of laws, so this is entirely something that we can influence as the student government. So that's pretty cool. But if you are looking at it, again, you want to take everyone's opinion, including administration, into account, so it's something so serious. But anyway, you want to give notice of charges. Ideally, the instructor would sit down with the student to talk it through before submitting anything. At which point, then something would be submitted, typically to the office of the provost, who will organize the facilitated meetings. This is again very much like the student conduct facilitated meetings. You have one faculty member from the honesty committee meet with both parties. Typically, it would be like the instructor and the students accused of violating the policy, though others beyond just the instructor could accuse someone of violating the policy as well. It could even be fellow students. According to the honesty code, all students have a responsibility of enforcing it. So it's not just on instructor to process legal proceeding, it's an administrative proceeding, so there's no lawyers involved. But the clear and convincing standard is, there's a clear and convincing legal standard, and that is significantly higher than the preponderance of the evidence standard. It's somewhere between the preponderance standard and the beyond reasonable doubt. So it's a little bit higher standard of evidence for academic honesty here. And again, all hearings, just like with student conduct, are recorded. I believe they're maintained for at least 6 years in the office of the provost, though this stuff is all confidential. The committee again makes a recommendation to the provost. The provost can decide whether or not to go based on it. They typically better follow the committee's recommendation. But then either party, which is a little bit unique again for honesty, so both the accuser or the accused can appeal the decision to the president of Auburn University, who does have the final say. And there you can see the
for Senator Huntley. She's not here. She just wanted me to report that the wheelchair basketball was great. There's a lot of student presence, and there will be a tournament in the spring, so we'll be sure to get the date to you all before our term runs out. Don't forget to RSVP to the fall feast event on 8th of fall if you can come. The LGBT resource display is still in the library for 2 more days, so go by and check it out if you get the chance. And we will get the survey results for the cultural competency course to you all soon.
Student affairs.
Mackenzie nursing, filling in for Sully. We met with Senator Turton today, got to talk about some really cool ideas she's working on, and we're looking forward to bringing them up later.
Thank you. Moving into reports of special committees and liaisons, beginning with BSU.
Hi, I'm Jayla filling in for Courtney. I'm one of the executive vice presidents. The report from BSU.
Student veterans.
Jackson. So I got a couple things today. So as a lot of y'all probably know, it's Veterans Week. So got a few things going on. If you need more information, you can go by the Veterans Office. We'll be happy to tell you. We're looking for donations for the Iron Bowl Ruck March that I mentioned last week. So what we're trying to do is have 22 pounds worth of supplies for some disabled veterans that live up there. We're gonna just pass it out. So any way y'all can help, that would be greatly appreciated. And then last but not least, so just we encourage people to just thank people for their service. Like if you have friends, family, just tell them you appreciate them. It's the biggest thing. Thanks.
Housing.
Thompson, housing. So the liaisons came as voting members of Senate. So we did do a little bit. Also, housing hosted Radical this past weekend. It's a major conference for RAs across the state. We had a little bit over 200 people coming to town from all over Spring Hill, UAB, Alabama, several other colleges. That went really well. We got to learn a lot about other programs, a lot of ways to better ourselves, and it was a good time.
Thank you. Captain.
We're tacky tourists. Other than that, no report.
Okay, we can go ahead and move into current orders of business. And
ESSB 181029101 elections calendar.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Cotton.
Calhoun business. As I mentioned last week, this is the elections calendar for the upcoming year. I did not receive any questions about it this past week. Hopefully, if you did have any questions, or if you have any questions in the future, please talk to Skylar or Bree Thomas. So, with that being said, I move to pass this bill as written.
Moved and seconded to adopt the bill as read. Is there any debate or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is adopted.
ESSB 1810292 election law chapter 708.
Board, liberal arts. Like I talked about last week, this bill was mainly just organization and making sure we clarified candidacy and what was allowed within each of them. I didn't get any questions, so I moved to pass this bill as written.
Moved and seconded to adopt the bill as read. Is there any debate or discussion on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. This bill is adopted.
ESSB 1810293 election law chapter 708.3.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Zenner.
Center Graduate School. This is the bill that I guess I talked about it last week about preliminary campaigning, basically expanding it to a week prior to the start of formal campaigning and including organization visits in this period. I gave my reasons for this last week. I haven't heard a lot of comments, so I'd be happy to discuss that now, but if not, I move to pass this bill as written.
President.
Senator Davis.
Davis, Liberal Arts. I just have a few things I want to talk about in front of the Senate body. As Senator Zenner's point, I did not have a chance to get to discuss with him, but I did get to talk with Bree Thomas about this bill on Friday, just getting feedback from her about some of these election law things. And first off, I want to start by expressing support for definitely a part of this bill, and that being the portion promoting campaign or organization visits during the preliminary campaign period. I support that because I think that promotes more informed voters. And that's definitely something that's been a goal of SGA, constantly a goal to increase voter turnout, so I definitely like that. More organizations can hear from candidates. That's something that we've discussed is having more time for candidates to be able to go to more organizations and not have to make a choice between a smaller organization compared to a larger organization that might have more voting power. That's definitely something I like about it, as well as I think limited impact on the student experience. From the portion about another week prior to formal campaigning, I think that having posters, billboards, and organization visits overall will have a limited impact on the student experience here at Auburn. That being said, talking with Bree, there is just kind of, I think, just maybe a negative externality that wasn't noticed in the writing of this bill. And we talked about how a week for preliminary campaigning isn't something that's bad. If anything, I think that's a good amount of time. But as we were looking at the elections calendar coming up for this next election, which was actually just passed, and looking at just some of the more minute details on that calendar for Bree and her team, if this bill were to pass as written, preliminary campaigning would start 1 week, at least 1 week prior to formal campaign. So that would mean that preliminary campaigning would start on January 23rd, I think at noon. One of the dates that is on her calendar for budgets to be returned to the elections board is January 22nd at, I think it was 5 p.m. Yes, 5 p.m. So in talking about that, that raised a concern with me. What if just a certain amount of campaigns are late with getting their budgets in, 3 or 4 people get them turned in right at 5 o'clock. Her team has to have gone through those budgets, cross-checked them with all of their initial materials, made sure that there's no violations, made sure that there's no issues with did they pay for things or did they have things that aren't on their budget, or is there an issue with the what's that sheet? Fair market value sheet. Is there an issue there? They have to spend a more limited amount of time to check those things and make sure that they are good to go, because the next day, if this bill were to pass as written, they could be putting out posters, putting out billboards, and I think that could potentially bring up an issue of an unfair advantage if there's something that happened to be missed, and it would just really put a lot of stress on them to have all their ducks in a row with less than 24 hours before people start putting up billboards and posters. Overall, we thought that a week isn't a bad amount of time for preliminary campaigning. I think a week is a great amount of time, but for this next election, I think that could potentially have some drawbacks, considering that the elections calendar is now set, and I just think that might be an issue. Going forward, I think that a week is a good amount of time, but for right now, I propose to amend this bill for 708.3.1 to read in the red, that is, and strike at least 1 week prior, to read that is no more than 1 week prior to the start of formal campaigning. And I would love to hear feedback from Senator Zinner or anyone else who has opinions on this bill, but that is a motion that I propose to change this bill.
No more than 1 week prior.
Yes, no more than 1 week prior.
An amendment has been made on the floor. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Senator Zinner.
Graduate School. I just want to mention that while there is a tentative campaign, part of the tentative campaign packet, that we just approved 3 dates. That was not every single date. We did not include the start of preliminary campaigning. So that can change pretty quickly, pretty easily, as due in part to the veto of a few weeks ago, and that can be handled entirely within elections. Additionally, yes, budgets are in. I would not expect everything to get done with the elections board overnight. Of course not. 24 hours, I expect that would take a few more days than that, and that's fine. However, the fact that you're putting stuff out, your budget should be representative, it should be correct. You're not turning it in to be checked to make sure it's okay. You're turning it in to make sure, well, just to turn it in so that the elections board has it, so that it can be reviewed, to make sure that's what's going to be going up online. So yes, if there is a problem with it, there should be a violation. I want that violation filed. I want everybody to be going by the books, following the rules. However, that's it. As I understand it, there's not a final budget due later than that. That's when it was due, is what I was saying. So also my concern is if we amend it in this way to saying no more than a week prior, well, that's basically codifying what we've been doing in the past, which is just a few hours in advance, which really wouldn't make much change. And I am concerned that that's just how it would continue on year to year, because really the emphasis with this bill is increasing this time. And I am sympathetic with the posters and billboards a little bit more so. If you could propose an amendment that would maybe make that a little bit more limited, I would be more okay with that, but I'm very concerned with those organization visits in particular, because you don't need anything physical for that. The only thing you need is a candidate, maybe some escorts, and a platform. And a platform, as we've already passed, as we've already discussed, is permitted to be well before this time, starting at call night, really, is when you can start sharing your platform with the public, with the student body. So that's not really a problem. I'm really concerned about those organization visits. So I would be willing to consider an amendment that would separate out those two things, but as it stands right now, I cannot support this amendment because it just limits that too much on organization visits in particular.
Osmond, Christian, is it possible that we move to send this back to committee so there could be more discussion this week between Senator Zinner and everyone else?
We could continue the first motion that was made on the amendment, and then we can take that one. That's an issue.
Second.
Move to produce question on the amendment. Senator Dobbs.
Sorry. Dogs at large. I guess, I'm sorry, this might be wrong, but I think Max makes a great point. He was saying that I think there's a difference between organization visits and getting materials out there. After discussing it with Bree, I think they will have such a short time to turn around, and maybe in the future this could be a great thing to have a week of billboards and posters, which personally I don't think that really promotes educated voters, whereas to Max's point, all you need is a candidate, maybe some escorts, and a platform to go into organization visits. So I think this would be a great thing to get through for the spring, to give major candidates and minor candidates the opportunity to go to organizations for possibly 2 weeks, whereas I don't think it's helpful right now to have billboards and posters out for 2 weeks. I think that's a really short turnaround, and as much as we would hope that the budget would be honest and follow that, I think it's important that elections board has their time to do their job well and thoroughly and make sure that's all checked out. So can I move that we split or do I have to vote on this first?
Yes, discussion is still on the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of Senator Davis's amendment to this bill, please say aye and click A. All opposed?
No.
Nays have it, and the amendment fails. We'll continue discussion on the bill now. Is there any further debate or discussion on the bill as a whole? Senator Dobbs.
Okay, jobs at large. I would just split the question between, well, I don't know how it would split. I'm sorry, but can I? Madam President, will Senator Zinner yield for questions?
Yes.
Okay. So how would you were saying that like there'd be a way to like split like organization visit and like limit billboards and posters? How would you? What's the best way with the code to do that?
From my perspective, there's a few ways one could do it. Obviously, part of it is we're dealing with preliminary campaigning, which starts all on one time. So the obvious way would be to split that into two different things. So make preliminary campaigning, keep that as is basically with that, when just as a few hours, maybe a day or two for posters and billboards, and then create an entire new item to the code, which would be organization visits, and that would be a week out. I think that would be the easiest way to do it. That would be the clearest way to do it. However, that would take a little bit of writing. Now, given that this election is not occurring until next semester, we still have a few months. So even if we were to table this back to the committee so we could get something that's really good and that we're all happy with, getting these these concerns in place, it would still be in effect in time for this election because we're not voting until the beginning of February. So with that, I move to send this back to my committee for a further review.
Moved and seconded to send it back to committee. Is there any discussion or any discussion?
Rumble Business, I've been talking with Bree. She said that it would have to be 30 days prior to the next election, and that would start on the day the Declaration of Intents are due. So if we do want to vote on this, it would have to be the day. If it went back to committee, it would not be able to go through until the next election. Is that right? I moved to you my time, Bree.
Just remember that whatever it is has to have 30 days to like wait and sit. So like whenever, if you send it back or do whatever with anything, it has to have 30 days. So just think about where we will be on the calendar with what you're trying to do.
Zinner Graduate School, I can understand that. Now, I would interpret the code a little bit differently. Now, this may be a question for the judicial branch, but given that I would very much like to see that, this would not be a huge thing, but it's just not something that I feel like I could do right stream of consciousness. So I move for a 10-minute recess to amend this and to come up with an amendment. I can do it.
Are there any objections to a 10-minute recess? Seeing none, we are.
I'm so sorry. Let's just say
That's why I think preliminary campaigning and not mess with that.
That's what I was going to say. It's hard to figure out.
it's all right.
Let's say it would be.
I mean,
This is what I'm talking about. This is
yeah, no, that part I like.
okay. Here's my proposal.
What is the brief, the other section?
It'll be organization. Why don't you just put organization? Like, for organization. Yeah, because it doesn't have to be a specific part, it just be specific to the organization, which is by itself. Then do we need to change it? Yeah, well actually, no, that's what I'm saying. It'll already say. Well, see, I like organizational campaigning, but it's not organizational campaigning.
We have 3 minutes left. You're at costume. You missed out. I feel like
We'll now reconvene and continue discussion on this bill.
Hey, y'all, we're gonna limit debate to 2 minutes.
Per person.
For motion. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion or debate on this bill? Senator Zinner.
Zinner, graduate school. During the recess, I did exactly as I expected, and I moved to propose this amendment as written. So basically, it is adding a second section, organizational campaign visits, which is the organization visits, and that's got to be at least a week out. The other one is pretty much a cleanup of what remains, what is right there, there is right now, cleanup, clarification, no major changes. So I move to pass this amendment as written. Though the other note is the numbering. That takes more time. That will require the changes of all of 708 beyond 708.3, which I'm proposing organizational campaign visits to be. So that is going to be something that I'm going to do with a clerical change. I'm not changing any other text. This is basically the same thing like I edit the title of the Code of Laws, or recently starting the amended date of the Code of Laws, or the table of contents. I'm not changing any text, but just to be clear, that is something else I would be doing. I would be fixing all the numbers of 708 beyond 708.3 so that everything is clean, as well as changing those sections. So I need to pass this amendment as written.
It's moved and seconded to adopt this amendment. Is there any further debate or discussion on this amendment?
Madam President.
Senator Davis.
Davis Liberal Arts. I just wanted to clarify what my goal was behind this amendment. I think that this really solves the issue that me and Bree were discussing. First off, we thought organization visits a week prior during preliminary campaign, great idea. But talking with her, they pretty much already have their calendar for how they're going to run this next election set in stone for how just their board's going to go about doing things. And having literally about 12 hours to check budgets along with materials to make sure posters and billboards were good to go. Not that we think that people, not that you would think that people would intentionally put false information on a budget, but if there was a mistake and they don't catch it within that 12-hour period, you have to assume that if it's due at 5 o'clock, you have to assume everyone's going to turn them in at 5 o'clock. You just have to assume for the worst in these kind of things. And that was what she expressed to me as a concern, that there wouldn't be enough time to properly vet those budgets and those materials lists to make sure that everything works out properly. I think that this is a definitely good way to organize this so that these campaign visits, or organization visits, can take place in a week prior to formal campaigning to allow more people to tell about their platform, but also that, especially for this upcoming election, with what they have kind of set within their board for how they're going to run things, they still now have time to check to make sure all budgets are good, posters, billboards, that'll be fine. So I think that's where I was coming from. I wasn't that's why that was my mentality, is make sure that they have enough time to make sure that all budgets and everything is properly vetted before preliminary campaign starts. And I think that this answers that issue, especially for this upcoming election. I think this is a good way.
Is there any further discussion or debate on this amendment? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of adopting Senator Zinner's amendment, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment stands. So going back to the initial bill, we rewrote the entire bill. So, is there any discussion on this bill as a whole with these changes? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of adopting this bill, please say aye and click A. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, and this bill stands.
PSSB 1A102904, Election Law, Chapter 7 and 8.4.
This bill is brought to you by Senator
Zinner, graduate school. So this is the amendment to formal campaigning. Again, just as we said with the other bill, the numbers will be fixed. It should not be a problem. But the main thing in here, like I mentioned the internet right there, but really the big thing is, if you go down a bit, is the clarifying that you are okay, it's okay to wear name tags and t-shirts in laboratories or classrooms, and that's not a violation in and of itself. Obviously, it's not changing writing a name on a board or going up to somebody in a computer lab and saying, hey, did you vote for my candidate? That's not changing. It's just this clarification of 708. So I move to pass this bill as written.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to adopt the bill as read. Is there any debate or discussion on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye and click A.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is adopted.
PSSB 18102905, Election Law, Chapter 709.6.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Zinner.
Zinner, Graduate School. This is another change to the platforms, basically saying that they should be posted on the SGA website prior to the start of formal campaigning. This was discussed last week, just going along with everything else, making our elections more about platforms, making sure those are available to the students that seek them out. So I move to pass this bill as written.
Moved and seconded to adopt the bill as read. Is there any debate or discussion on this bill? Senator.
I would like to propose an amendment which adds at least 1 week prior to 709.6.3. Because if we're going to start the organizational visits earlier, then we need to basically, if we're going to tell people, hey, like go to my website or go to the website, like my platform, like you want to learn more about me and like our stuff. And so we'll have the 500 word platform out with campaign materials, which will come out 1 week, like 2 weeks before, basically already. So that'll already be in and checked. So I feel like we would be able to have all of these published at least 1 week before formal campaign.
Senator Bailey, is your proposed amendment between
All candidates platforms will be published on the elections website at least 1 week prior to start formal campaign. Yeah, so organizations can then look.
An amendment has been made. Is there any debate or discussion on this amendment?
Madam President.
Senator Davis.
I'd like to ask, I guess, our Director of Elections, like, what would be the implication of that as far as just overall changing that time frame? I don't know when campaign period required to be turned in, so I don't really know much about how that works.
In the current calendar, this is feasible. We'll have the platforms in a version, depending on which one they want to turn in, at the way before, a week before the start of the campaigning. So this is feasible.
Any further debate? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote on this amendment. All those in favor of Senator Bailey's amendment, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. We'll now move back to discussion on the bill as a whole. Is there any further debate or discussion on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. This bill is adopted.
PSSB 18102906, Election Law, Chapter 710.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Zinner.
Zinner, Graduate School. This is, as I mentioned last week, very similar to one of the bills we struck down on October 1st. With the exception of taking out that very controversial line about disclosing where campaign budgets come from. Now, because of some feedback and discussions that I had over the past week, I do feel it necessary to clarify. Just that all of this really is a clarification of what are already the rules on t-shirts. We're not making new rules on where t-shirts are. We're not doing really much of that. This is just a reorganization and clarification for the most part. We're not redefining t-shirts as gimmicks or anything like that. So I move to pass this bill as written.
It's moved and seconded to adopt the bill as read. Is there any debate or discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye and click A.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and the bill is passed.
PSSB 18102907, Chapter 702, Election Law.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Huntley and presented by Senator
Turton business. So this again is from Senator Huntley, and so because of the time constraints that we mentioned earlier, we would like this to go into effect, to go ahead and be voted on tonight, so that way it can go into effect for this election. But I'm going to read, if y'all don't mind, from Ada Ruth. So she says, the purpose of this bill is to address the concerns that came with the veto, in addition to addressing the concerns of the original bill changing the way the campaign packet is handled. I thought that this would be a good middle ground of recognizing the need for a balance of powers with SGA, while also recognizing the need for another set of eyes to evaluate I thought that they would be the ideal group to evaluate the campaign packet for its use. So I know everyone hasn't had a chance to really think about this, and this is obviously not an ideal situation. So I don't have time to discuss and ask questions. But so this is, instead of taking the campaign packet to the Senate body, which we voted on and then has now been vetoed, this is a compromise and taking that campaign packet to eBoard. So eBoard is a group that has decided to stay out of elections entirely. So they are assumably the most the unbiased group, and I think that someone in a moment is going to yield some time to the director of elections. But I do think this is a good compromise because, you know, in the same way that a Senate body could have bad intentions or could vote with their own personal agenda, we don't want this to happen, but a director of elections could as well. And so having this board approve it, you know, that would have no hand in the game, I think that would be a really good place to meet in the middle.
Madam President.
Senator Rummel.
Rummel Business. I move to yield my time to the Executive Director of Elections, Bree Thomas.
When this, as far as like the powers and the authority of the board, like I mean, if you put it in the code, it's what they would have to do. Also, just consideration for the fact that e-board are the people who adjudicate the cases that come through when somebody submits an election violation. So things that go in the packet obviously come directly from the code. And I do want to clarify the things that weren't in the code that got put in the packet have since been removed because there's no backing up in the code for that. But e-board is the group that has to hear the violations to the code of laws regarding elections. And so in logic, it makes a little bit more sense for the elections board, the people who have to hear the violations, to approve the packet so there won't be, hopefully, any violations. Is there any further discussion on this bill?
Madam President.
Senator Davis.
Davis Liberal Arts. I think that is definitely a good compromise. What's the goal behind, and I didn't get a chance, well, I had a chance to read it, but also I'm kind of curious, is the goal behind bringing it to current orders for, did you say it was for this upcoming election in the spring?
Because, yeah, so it would have to pass tonight if it was going to be implemented in the spring.
Okay, I thought it was 30 days.
Before
can anyone,
November 30th.
yeah, just kind of inquiry. Is there a time frame, 30 days? Is that so it has to be done tonight? Is tonight? Does anyone have any? Doesn't seem like that's right. Correct.
So the Constitution states that any changes made to anything elections related doesn't take effect for 30 days. So if you passed it tonight, it would take effect in 30 days. The fact of the matter is, campaign packets are going to have to be provided to candidates before 30 days from now. So we're not really, regardless of whether we do it tonight, next week, the following week, Bree's already going to have to share this campaign packet with candidates before 30 days from now. So.
Then, in that case, that's not going to have any true effect on this upcoming election cycle. I motion to postpone this motion to next meeting, so I guess effectively return it to future orders, since it's not going to have any true effect, so that we can, as senators, do our due diligence in discussing with Bree as well as people who are involved with elections, just the implications of this bill, if it's not truly going to have an impact on this upcoming election.
The motion has been made. Is there any discussion on this motion? Senator Turner.
I support this motion as well, especially if it will not have effect, and that way Senator Huntley will be able to present some of her ideas behind this one. Thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor of sending PSSB 181100507 back to future orders, please say aye with an A.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and this will return to future orders to be discussed next week. Seeing as we've completed current orders, we'll move into future orders, and Maggie will call the first bill.
PSSB 181100501, Chapter 200 revisions.
This bill is brought to you by Senator Albright.
Right, this is just a lot of cleanup for Title II, not a lot of substance change. First thing is we took out additional in the title because this is the
brought to you by Senator Zinner.
Center Graduate School. This is very, very simple. Basically, making things equal between the federal laws and the Constitution. We passed a lot on Title III, and we changed some of these things regarding the votes for the impeachment. This is one thing that Pearson caught as we were just recently discussing vetoes because of the veto. So this is basically moving it from 4/5 to 2/3 of a vote to overrule a veto, which is what it says in the Constitution. Now, with the 4/5 that we had, I guess the code is making a stricter rule, but I'm perfectly happy to make it the same as the Constitution, prevents confusion. So that's the idea behind this bill. Very straightforward.
PSSB 18110504, Chapter 712, election law.
Brought to you by Senator Zinner.
Yeah, this is mostly clarification and a little bit of a rewrite of 712 regarding voting. So, for example, there it mentions you identify yourself with your Auburn University username and password. It's making it gender neutral. It's taking out the part about good standing because having good standing, anybody can vote. You don't have to be in good standing as it is right now. And in fact, I would like to amend that entire section based on information that I just received at Senate Exec this past week. So luckily I've already done this, and this was already, I did not want to make any significant changes after having the approval of my committee. I need my committee's approval to change the law bills, of course. So I want to amend that entire thing. So students must be actively registered and enrolled in classes at Auburn University in order to be eligible to vote. Because I was told if you have a hold, there are still some times when it would be perfectly legitimate that you vote. You are on a payment plan, for example. That's not entirely uncommon. So you're still paying for this semester or last semester installments. You got a hold, you can't register until you got that paid off, but you're still paying. You got a program worked out with the university. You should be able to vote. So that's the idea behind the holds there. I'd like to change that as I got that. Sorry, I did not send it to you. It was 712.2. Students must be actively enrolled in classes at Auburn University in order to be eligible to vote. That's all I wanted to say. And yeah, strike out obviously have the holds. Yes. Yeah, they have. I think that's what they have. I would like that. I would be making this on the floor next week, but I'd rather do the future order just so you know exactly what's coming up, so that there is the least surprises next week, so you can really talk to your positions and get feedback. If you can go down a little bit. 712.8, I'm changing that from Tiger Eye to AU Access. We do not have Tiger Eye anymore. We use AU Access. I remember in exec, there's some people who were like, what's Tiger Eye? I've been around long enough to remember it. We use AU Access. So that is the final change on this bill.
And that is it for current and future orders this evening. We'll go ahead and move into announcements. OSP applications are due next Thursday, or this Thursday at 4:45. Information's on the SGA website, so if anybody is a member of an organization that should be wanting block seating, please keep that on your radar and be sure to reach out to them. Also, Family Fridays this Friday, like I already mentioned, from 11 to 1. Then also, freshman senators, you all should be placed by tomorrow, so be on the lookout for an email from me and committees. Be ready to welcome a new face. And then also we're talking a lot about timeline and kind of where we're at in the year. We are kind of getting to the end of the semester, and so projects that y'all are working on, projects that you have been working on throughout this term, just please keep that in mind that those need to be coming to Senate Exec and to the floor if you want to see them this semester. So just kind of keep that in mind, and if y'all need any help with getting ideas on pieces of paper or kind of carrying out that last step of the legislative process, let me know. That's what I'm here for. I think out of all the groups that we had present their costumes, we forgot one. So the front table, if y'all would like to share your costume and then any announcements we all have.
councils to inform them of what's going on in the Senate and use them as a way to really gather feedback of what's going on in your school or college. And lastly, tragically, I will be at a conference next week, so I will not be here. So Brad will be coming out of retirement, so take it easy on him and too much fun time.
Brad, are there any more announcements this evening? Seeing as there's no further orders of business, this meeting is adjourned. Meeting roll call, please.
The costume is there with you all. Joey, good to see you. I am so sorry. I felt sorry.
Better way to say it.
I did arts and crafts. Absolutely.